as I continue to try to recover from this past disastrous week, let's go into two more that I'm getting caught up on now. I saw them when they came out. I'm just getting caught up on video stuff at this point. So let's start with Jackass Forever. And it was interesting going into this because when this was supposed to come out back in like October, and we were going into that, I had mentioned to Owen about how like, do you even review this in quotes? Because like, how do you even review Jackass? So my attempt at that to figure that out was when I did that video on the trilogy back in like September or something, and that came out relatively easily. So much easier than I was anticipating. So yeah, I guess I'll just try to remember how I did that, and we'll just talk about it. The the new, very critically acclaimed and beloved Jackass movie, and with the new cast members, and of course, obviously, we're mostly without Bam, and obviously without Dunn. And I was thinking at first, like, a lot of people were saying, like, and we talked about it in that previous video, where it was this whole idea of how much Bam really contributed, like, when you look back on it, and how a lot of his was just like sort of chaos towards other people. When typically the Jackass thing is the joke that you're doing is on you, and what exactly we went into that whole thing, and then obviously Dunn was always going to feel missing, but I did feel like, as much as I do like the new cast members, I felt the absence of Bam and Dunn more than I thought I would, because I felt like we had moved on enough and we had heard enough about it that my mind was prepped enough that it was like, yeah, I feel like it's going to be fun. And I still went in optimistic and came out optimistic about them, like, maybe these ideas of them going forward with most of the new cast members we see here. But yeah, but it still didn't take away enough that this is still a really great experience and brought back a lot of old feelings anyway. So when you look at the opening scene, because I feel like that's one of the first things you think about is, what's the big opening gonna be? Usually it's just some sort of stunt or something, but they've been getting more and more spectacle-like as they go. The more popular the movies have become with their theatrical releases. And when you see what happens here, you kind of get the idea of what Knoxville was talking about in all of his interviews about the stuff that they're getting away with now. Because you kind of, watch the other movies anyway and think, like, how did the MPA ever let this get by, or this moment get by? And Knoxville basically said that it's almost like the MPA have given up on them at this point, where it's like, whatever it is, we don't even want to go through the whole process, so just put out what you have, and we'll barely ask you to censor it, if at all. And yeah, you just immediately get this sense from this opening scene that they're going as big and out there as they possibly can, and you also get the sense that they have, like, no real leash on them anymore. Like, if they really did much before anyway, but you would just immediately get the sense of all bets are off, and then just everything already feels like just in the true fashion of them. And then we get this sort of real moment with Steve-O right after that, where he's talking to the camera, and it actually feels like, because I love the fact that technically, if you had to put a genre on these movies, I guess you could say comedy first, but I guess the other one would be documentary, technically. And it actually has the feel of like a real, legit documentary when they're talking to Steve-O, and he has this sort of moment where he's talking about how, when they did the third movie, and how it felt like the last one, and how it had been, like, when they did that one, it was like, there was like a 10-year gap, and then it's like, now we've had a 10-year gap between 3 and now, and like how much that puts it in perspective. And then once we have that moment where it's like, oh yeah, like, this has been going on for so long, and we've been attached to these people for so long, and watching these people for so long, and then with, like, the most poetic timing possible, right after this moment where we get real and we establish where we are in time and what all we've been through and how long it's been, Knoxville gets farted on. And then it goes right into the first stunt, and then you realize that we're right back where we are. It goes, and then it goes into the first bit, and it's like, oh yeah, and here's where it feels like now that we've established how long it's been, how long we've been here, how long they've been doing this to their bodies, we're just right back to where we started, and starting all over again, and all the old feelings start to come back, and it's really just kind of the perfect intro. Like take out the fact that they went as big as they possibly could for their actual intro, where we get the intros and stuff like that. But then with this moment that kicks off the rest of the movie, where we're just talking to Steve-O and doing a bit of a retrospective, then it just immediately takes us back there, and you could tell right away that this was gonna work and everything was gonna be fine. Even if a lot of our cast members are newer and we've lost a couple that were staples of the whole thing, but yeah, it's obviously doing just fine, and they're doing just fine. There's obviously great moments about that also, where the idea, and I think this is in the marketing also, or they used it in the marketing, the idea of it basically feeling like you were connecting with old friends after not having seen them for a while, like you as audience members as well, and just little moments are what really bring that home. Like the moment when Steve-O's coming out of his trailer, I think, and Knoxville hits him in the head with like a dodgeball or a volleyball or something, or a basketball, and it's just the simplest bit. And it's like if you were to see that, like just anybody, like if you were to just see a random video that's just that, you might kind of chuckle at it, if that, and then you'd move on. But because it was Steve-O getting hit and Knoxville doing it, it's almost like what, like whenever your friends or people you know personally or have known for a long time do something, it's always going to be funnier probably than if you see a complete stranger doing it. And I feel like that's the appeal of seeing these two dudes that we've seen doing this for so long, from our childhoods to now. Just the simplest things like that. Just hitting Steve-O in the head with a ball is going to be the funniest thing ever. And it works that way. And they do bring in some more... Like, they hit a lot of the classic bits, and then we also have some new bits that are really wild, like the whole Silence of the Lambs thing, and the way that sort of kind of builds the more it goes, and it's big enough also that it allows these individual moments to happen, because that's really what these movies do, is they kind of just capture, like, there's the big setups, obviously, and all the planning, but then it's the in-the-moment stuff that really sticks with you, like the idea of the fact that they're in pitch blackness, and Aaron finds a door, and he's trying to convince Dave that he's found a door, and Dave doesn't believe him, so he appears to be trying to make wind to signal to Dave where the door is, and it's stuff like that, stuff that could never possibly be planned, is what these movies capture so well. And it's like, the setup is great already, but it's those in particular, and it's like, knowing what's... Because it seems almost like tailor-made that they set it up. They set a lot of stuff up. They set a lot of stuff up to be like really brief, and it's just like, here's the bit, and then that's it, and then they just go to the next thing. Sometimes they're only like 10 seconds long, like Wee-Man putting his head through the board in one of the older movies or something. But here it's like, it's getting to a point also where the more elaborate it is, the more you can tell it's almost like they're setting up for like, because they know those magical moments that are in between that can't be planned will happen somewhere in here. And it's almost like a lot of that goes into the planning also, and so you can get stuff like that, and that very last bit with Dave right before it ends, where he talks about just not wanting to leave the room, he's just going to start his life here. All that stuff is, and as like I said, I don't know if it would work as much if they weren't people we're attached to, but that's part of the magic of this one especially, is that we've been attached to these people for so long, that the payoffs are going to feel even bigger and funnier. But we do get the other side of that, because now we are watching a lot of people that we don't know that well doing this also, and they blend in nicely for the most part. There are a couple of people, like Rachel Wilson, and then he's obviously not like a cast member, but one of the guest people coming in as Eric Andre, and I remember being really pumped. The fact that Eric Andre being a part of Jackass just seemed like inevitable. Like, of course this would happen, and yes, this is a match made in heaven. Um, but with Eric Andre and Rachel Wolfson, I almost feel like I would have wanted to see a lot more of them being utilized than they are, especially since Wolfson only has like two real bits that I can remember: the licking the taser and the scorpion. And in the way that she's like seems like she's barely phased by anything, and it's like it just makes you think like, what else is she, like what other crazy shit can she do and seem not phased by it? I would love to see more of that. But I think those are the only two bits that I remember, and then they pretty much only bring Eric Andre in for that one bit, where they prank him, which I do think works on the level of it's so interesting to see Eric Andre being the one being pranked. Like it's like this case of Bizarro World, and that's wild. But I would have, he would have been game to do just as much of the crazy shit as they would. But I think the only other bit that he's there for is the scorpion thing, and he's just kind of there as a. I mean, he gets a good line, but it's like he's just kind of in the background, and it's like that's. There's no way you had Eric Andre on this set, and you only got like a couple of bits with him. There's no way. So I guess that's one thing where it's like I do know that 4.5 is coming. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a Netflix thing, and I think I heard it's like maybe in the May area or something. That was just an estimate. And I'm really curious what's in that because while this movie is great as is, this is one where like the first three movies felt pretty complete to me, and I know some people are kind of think that three isn't as good, but when I saw those, it felt like a complete experience. This was the first one where I was like, I really love the experience we got, but I felt like I could feel the fact, and I don't think it's just because we're missing two staple cast members, but it felt like there was more to like it felt like there was a lot we didn't see. So I'll be really curious to like I almost didn't want to even talk about this until 4.5 came out, but there is still enough here to definitely go into and appreciate as is in this current form. But yeah, I'm really curious what all of the missing bits are and how much more they might have done, and how much I don't know if I can say bigger, but the lengths that they'll go sometimes to do what they do. Because there's some crazy shit in the .5 stuff that didn't make the movies, but so I'll definitely be curious of what's going on with that here. And I love that as far as stuff just sort of not changing, the idea that a lot of this seems to have come about. We talked about this before, of Knoxville just kind of wanting to bring old cartoons he used to watch alive. And now that's a big appeal to this also is literally watching this stuff that should never for any reason exist in real life, and they make it happen. It's the kind of thing you would only see in a cartoon. And so like the running into the false wall thing, and it's like it's so simple, but it's like how many times did we see Wile E. Coyote do that as kids, and it's like to actually see that in real life and to know that that's essentially what the goal is. It will always be so interesting to me, and I love that that's sort of like how Bugs Bunny is essentially Knoxville's muse with a lot of this. So that and the way he brings in silent bits also. We talked before about how it's so interesting to me how much of a cinephile that Knoxville is, and the fact that he takes so much inspiration from stuff that you wouldn't expect from the way that this series was held, as far as like like they were saying before. Knoxville mentioned in an interview about the critical acclaim this has received, and how it's more like this might have been his interview on the Steve-O podcast where he's talking about how the critics nowadays are the people that grew up with it, and the critics from back then, where it was a new thing, were not those people at all and didn't have that connection to it already. So that's why you're seeing more and more of an embracing of it from all angles, and not necessarily just like the built-in audience that they have. Like it's actually getting out there as this weird phenomenon that is actually worthwhile and actually worth praise for what it is they're doing, even though it just looks like they're doing stupid shit. That's the whole concept, is that they're just doing stupid shit. There's that great, I would say, almost profound moment when they're getting ready to start the cup test, and Knoxville introduces it, and then we see the clip of him doing it the first time, And then he says, like, 20 years later, we're still doing the same stupid shit. And it's like, that's kind of the whole thing. That's the whole magical thing of this movie's existence. And the fact that it's still working with new people or the people we've been seeing do it for 20 years. And talking about the cup test, it is really interesting to watch Aaron in this movie especially, because there's the whole thing where how many times through all the movies and the show can you watch Aaron take an absolute beating and start to like really feel bad for him? Like there was the whole discussion about, is he bullied by the crew or not? And what's interesting about that is even though a lot of this movie is horrible shit happening to Aaron, when you hear everybody else talk about it, they say that the whole thing is essentially a competition for footage, like footage that will make that's good enough to make the movie and funny enough to make the movie. And it's like you start to feel bad for Aaron when you see him go through what he goes through in this movie, but at the same time it's like because he's in so much of the movie shows like how in high regard what he's doing is. That we see so much of him in this particular movie especially, regardless of the horrible shit that's happening to him. But I loved especially that moment when the dude was there and he was demonstrating his punch on the punching bag, and Aaron's like over here, and you can see Aaron feel it. He can feel the punch long before it's near him, and stuff like that. That's another one of those just totally magical moments that can just get captured. So you always want to throw it out to the camera guys also, like Cosmic and Bangs and everybody else, that's able to capture this in just the right way. We talked especially in 3. Like, 3 is especially well shot for the shit that happens on the fly, which is great. And, and we do get stuff that's really big, like the bear. Feels like it was one of those things that was always going to be, like something you can imagine them doing back in the day, but at the same time also feels like it's a point that we've built up to. Like, they've done so much crazy shit already that this was one of the few things that was left. And to see, like, just the build up to it, when they're just treating it like a lie detector test. And Aaron just kind of stops him and says, just let me figure some things out, I believe is all he says. And that's that just watching all of them in the moment, like, have to confront these scenarios before they even grow into their ultimate punchlines. Just there's so many things in this movie where they just perfectly capture the essence of the whole thing, like the whole Jackass franchise in general. And it's, as I said, we talked a lot before about how the whole thing is just lightning in a bottle, and that's just it's especially coming through in this one, I feel like, and also on top of the fact that they're getting older and are still doing stuff that's just as crazy. Obviously, Knoxville's starting to come down a little bit from what he's willing to do, but I don't think anybody is telling him that he should not feel that way. It's still like, I'm always afraid, like when you hear about Knoxville doing all this wrestling stuff to promote it, and it's like, I'm always afraid like it's going to be the stupidest, most mundane thing that's going to get him killed. And it's like, yeah, you survived the bull, you survived the magic trick, and it's like, this is a good time to say, you know what, I think stuff that's that extreme is probably done now. Because we do get great stuff, like, because Knoxville's commitment to this does feel like the whole jumping off point. Like, the fact that there's, and obviously you'll hear all the crew say this, there's always a reason that proves why Knoxville's like the poster child of the franchise. And when you get that moment where he's shot out of the cannon and he spreads his wings, and it's like, it seems like, a simple bit, but it's like, just imagining how difficult that probably must be in the moment, to actually think to spread your wings that majestically after you've been fired that high into the air. And it's like, that moment just really shows, like, the Knoxville commitment that seems to kind of be the setting the bar that everybody else will hopefully try to reach, or at least reach as much as they can, but nobody quite reaches the insanity of Knoxville, the insanity that we love so much. So I think one of my favorite Knoxville moments ever is the riot control test from the second movie, when it fires off and it's so fucking loud, and everybody retreats and says there's no way I'm doing that, while Knoxville's laughing hysterically. And I can't unsee it now when I think it was a comment on that particular bit where somebody said that Johnny Knoxville is actually the closest thing we probably have to a real life Joker. Doing all this insane shit, all this dangerous shit, and his response is always to laugh hysterically. And he's such an incredibly fascinating person, and I love that he exists. And he's a good actor too. He's like there's so much stuff around him that you can branch off of that's just complete quality. And it's and even the spin-off stuff like Bad Grandpa's movie is actually like really good. The Oscar nominated Bad Grandpa movie. It's insane. And I said before in that other video, speaking of Oscars, it is still so wild to me that we probably wouldn't even have the Jackass franchise if not for acclaimed writer, director, and Oscar winner Spike Jonze. The director of Being John Malkovich and Adaptation and Her is such a big driving force in Jackass's complete existence. It's so crazy what has come together to make this franchise exist, and what it's given us and how it gives that to us, and then what we've all been taking away from it, and how we see people, now coming into the franchise that grew up with it, and to see that it's like this whole thing that's just continuously gone on. Of all things, this. And it's somehow, though, it makes perfect sense. Where it's like you say like, oh, it's so crazy how all this came together, but it's like the fact that it does exist and it has had the impact that it's had somehow feels right. It's weird. I don't. And it's like we were saying, yeah, it can also be looked at from another side to say like, like the decline of society and people and all that, and it's like this is what's entertainment, but it's like there's something that's just so smart about the way they approach the stupid shit that they do, in the way that they've given to their audience at this point, and it's like and like all those moments that could not exist in a scripted universe that just are all over this franchise. And this is really just, yeah, it's like, I'm trying to stick to the movie itself, but I mean, it really just puts into perspective the whole thing, and why it still works so well. And it's like, it's really just the fact that Forever is just continuing this so well, and potentially in a new direction entirely with bringing in all these new people. But as our original crew might get a bit more and more on the sidelines as we go, which is sad, but at the same time, yeah, it's so conflicting because it's like I would never want to hear about any of them dying doing something like this, but then at the same time, it's like, is there any other way that any of them would want to go? And it's like I don't know, because they all have their own level of insanity. But it's perfect and endearing insanity that we all love them for. So, yeah. So I think that's pretty much the most you can say about this movie. I guess mainly I go into it thinking I'm really curious what's in 4.5, because I do feel like that it feels like there's bits missing, but we'll see how that goes down. Because of course always there's going to be. That's the whole point of the 0.5 thing, is there's always like a whole other movie's worth of stuff that didn't even make it, so we'll see how that goes, and we'll see if there's anything in 0.5 that's kind of like, oh, that really should have been in the movie or something, but I guess we'll see whenever that comes. Like I said, the last time I looked it up, I had heard they were estimating like in the May area or something, so I guess we'll see how that pans out, but last I heard it is definitely a Netflix thing, so it'll be there when it's there, so let's go into the second and last thing we're going to talk about in this particular video, which is Moonfall, the new Roland Emmerich movie. This shit's really annoying, because I know people go into this movie, and movies like this, and they say, oh, of course it's going to be dumb, oh, it's self-aware, of course it's going to be shit, and we're going to have a great time watching how shitty it is. I just don't understand how people aren't tired at this point of watching movies that are shit. And it's like, even if it's intentional shit at this point, shitty movies are just really exhausting. And that's basically what my main takeaway is from this. I heard a lot of people apparently saw this and they were having so much fun and just really embracing how shitty it was, but I don't know if just, maybe I'm getting too old and life's getting too short. But I just have so much trouble having fun at movies that are as shit as Moonfall is. And it's like, typically the dumber it gets and the shittier it gets, the more the people that love it have fun with it. But it's like, this movie is so... First of all, it feels so incredibly long, but for a Roland Emmerich disaster movie, it's kind of short. Including credits, it's 2 hours and 10 minutes. For an Emmerich movie, that's pretty short. But it feels like 3 times the length of his good movies, like Independence Day. But I kind of felt like I was getting bad vibes immediately when it starts. And it's kind of like this Gravity-esque opening where it's just them working and they're outside the shuttle and they're in space and they're having fun and they're singing, and then a disaster strikes. Very reminiscent of Gravity's opening. But it's Patrick Wilson singing Africa, and I'm going to be honest with you. I honestly, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody with this, but I genuinely have no idea if people really like that song or if it's just the meme. But it's like, as soon as I hear it, I just get annoyed. And they're really, really playing it up as this being the scene of Patrick Wilson over the top singing Africa. And it's like this is the crowd they want to go for. And that's, like, I was just getting bad vibes, and then we have our, gravity-like disaster, and then we see the moon doing some weird shit, and then about 10 years later we realize that the moon is off its orbit, and it's going to start, like, breaking up, and the pieces are coming to Earth, and they're going to just kill us all. So, that's been a theme a lot lately, too. So, there was that shitty movie, How It Ends, and then, of course, Don't Look Up, and all this other stuff. So, yeah, Hollywood's really under the impression that we are eventually going to get hit by something, and that's been all the rage lately. So, when it starts off, it is, another Roland Emmerich movie. We're building up to what the disaster's going to be, because, Joe Blow, comedy relief, discovers something. And of course, because he's this unlikely character and a character nobody's going to listen to, he's going to run around trying to give out all this information, and nobody's going to listen to him, and everything's going to escalate really quickly, and then, of course, he may or may not save the day, of course, after wreaking all this chaos trying to get the message out. And it's always through this really stupid series of conveniences, like, he has a cat named Fuzz Aldrin, and Fuzz Aldrin just happens to piss on the right newspaper at the right time to get him to look at something. Halle Berry's kid has a toy shuttle that's like some clue to something, or gives her an epiphany of sorts. And this is how things are moving forward for a while, is stupid shit like that. And, of course, we're dealing with all the other people here, all the other characters that have all these same problems. It's weird how repetitive the problems the other characters have in this movie. Like, there's, like, ex-spouses are a thing throughout this movie. Children of divorce are a thing throughout this movie. And Michael Pena plays the stepdad, where you're never quite sure if we're supposed to like him or not. As we saw with Tom McCarthy in 2012, and what happened there. I guess that's one of Emmerich's things, I guess. And we're going to get really, really shitty dialogue. And I know you might say, oh, this is a spectacle movie, it doesn't matter about the dialogue. If anything, it's more charming if the dialogue is shitty. And I've said that about some movies, I'm sure, that just worked for me. But it's... everything kind of has to come together in a certain way. Like, if you just make any old random disaster movie and just say, oh, we don't need to do, like, we don't need good dialogue or anything like that, we don't need good characters or anything like that, just as long as we, and it's, it's a point in time where more often than not it's by accident if something like that happens to be good. But a lot of the time, most of the time, it's like this where it just feels like just nobody really gave a fuck. And which obviously is going to strip any charm away from it. And maybe I'm just looking at it too cynically or something, but it's more often than not stuff like this that doesn't seem like it's trying outside of one aspect. It's gonna be bad. But I mean, in particular, this movie, like it's not just that the movie has bad characters, and it's not just that the movie has bad dialogue. It has especially bad characters and bad dialogue, like really, really rough, like really, really hard to sit through all this shit. And that's obviously a lot of the reason, because typically in big spectacle movies, like the Transformers movies come to mind, where the reason those movies feel so long and drawn out is because the action is so long and drawn out and feels endless. And it's interestingly enough, it's not really that stuff. It's not the disaster stuff that feels like, oh my god, this movie's so goddamn long. There's a lot of character stuff, but at the same time, like no character stuff, that matters. Like they're spending a lot of time on shit that just there's no reason to care about it at all. Because you even got people like Halle Berry and Patrick Wilson at the front of this, and it's like, well, maybe they'll bring something. I mean, she's Halle Berry, she's got an Oscar. He's Patrick Wilson, he's got charm to, spare. But that's none of that is here. If there's one character that stood out where I was like, can we get a little bit more of that, is this very sort of ominous Donald Sutherland that's hanging out in the shadows for one scene and kind of sets the ball rolling on what's going on here, and then I don't recall ever seeing him again. It's almost like this could have been his JFK character, only talking about the crazy shit that's supposed to be going on. That could have been wild. Just have a moment in the middle of the movie that's just like a half an hour Donald Sutherland monologue about what's going on. That would have been crazy and fun, but with like the sort of, JFK editing and stuff like that, that would have been cool, but no, all the exposition in this movie is exactly what you think it's going to be in a movie like this, where when we start off 10 years prior, before before Patrick Wilson's kid grows up into Charlie Plummer, he's just a small child, and the wife's talking to him, soon-to-be ex-wife's talking to him about what's all going on, and, how he's, a disgraced astronaut now after this whole moon thing, because nobody believes him, because it's so ridiculous. And the kid says something like, yeah, that's why we lost the house, or something like that. Like, it's so, like, really shoddy exposition and really blatant exposition is already bad enough, but when you give it to a kid, I feel like it's just 30 times worse. Like, it sounds 30 times more unnatural than it already does anyway. I guess it's because, like, what kid is going to say that or something like that, but it's, yeah, like, anything going on with the characters here, I've got nothing for. And, like I said, the fact that the movie actually does start to have, or try to have, these big emotional moments and big payoffs for these characters, literally, like, at the very last minute, it's just a whole, like, that's, I mean, it's a lot of things are bringing this movie down, but, so it's really excelling at being shitty in the aspects that are typically shitty in movies like this anyway, but I mean, just really, really going hard on it. Where, like I said, I felt like it was, if I had been watching this at home, I wouldn't have lasted. Like, I would have given up long before this thing ended. But it's, because here's the thing, is when you, say you strip all that away, and say you're just like, none of that stuff matters, forget dialogue and characters, it's effects movie, that's what it is. So, you get stuff and you have, like, a tsunami comes through, and that's our first big one, and it's like, this is all well and good, I guess, but it doesn't look, it's looked better before, like, in Emmerich movies. Like, I did a video a few years ago on The Day After Tomorrow and 2012 together, and I praised 2012's effects, and I still praise 2012's effects, and The Day After Tomorrow for that matter. But here it does feel like there's something that... And maybe it's because it feels like we've seen it before, because there's also that great sort of tidal wave scene in Hereafter. And it's like, okay, the big, water taking everything out thing. It's like, okay, we've seen it now, but now it kind of looks like a video game a little bit. And so nothing's really working in the favor of the effects here either. Like, it all just feels like old news at this point. And then when they're, out in space and all the big action is starting to happen, it just sort of feels like knockoff Armageddon or something, like a mockbuster for Armageddon or something. I mean, I have mixed feelings on Armageddon, I guess we'll say. But it's... yeah, but that's another one, too, where, like, I was using the Transformers example. Yeah, Bay especially is in this territory of it's the action is what makes the movie boring, it turns out. Because it's just so... It just goes on and on and on and fucking on long after it's made its point and long after it's had its initial impact of what you're seeing. And then it's just like, oh my god, I'm seeing this amazing thing. And it's like, oh, I'm still seeing this thing. And then just 2.5 hours of that is going to desensitize you to that thing. It's not going to be the spectacle that it was. And that's the thing is, like, we've already seen so many disaster movies at this point, and ones with really great effects, that by the time you get to a movie like Moonfall, it just really doesn't cut it anymore, unless you're specifically looking for a movie that shouldn't even have a theatrical release. You're looking for straight-to-streaming shit, or straight-to-video shit. The mockbuster shit is what you're looking for if Moonfall is a movie that you have a great time at. And I don't want to bash anybody for having a good time at a movie. That would be shitty. And it goes completely against like what the magic of movies is. But I mean, movies like this bring the worst out of me. that's all I can really put it as, I would say. Because you have this apocalyptic event going on, and a lot of the times it feels like it's kind of just going on in the background. Like, nobody's reacting to it. They're too caught up in their shitty dialogue, like how Patrick Wilson feels like Halle Berry threw him under the bus, essentially, with that opening scene, and that's why Wilson's disgraced now. And so this apocalyptic event is happening, and the world is going to end and all that, and when Halle Berry walks into the room, his response is, "Nope, I don't take orders from you." And it's like, these are our heroes, And it's the kind of thing that I wouldn't even worry about that much if it weren't for the fact that you could tell by the end we're supposed to feel something for these people. And it's like, these people, everybody in this movie is so self-absorbed, especially considering what's going on now. Like, what was that line that everybody hated in Tenet? Where it was like they were saying, like, all human life on Earth will be destroyed or something. And Elizabeth Debicki says, including my son. And there's a lot of lines like that one from nearly every character. That's the kind of people we're dealing with in this. So, if those are the kind of people that you like hanging out with, you get a lot of them in this movie, while the apocalyptic stuff is happening in the background, with them not even really acknowledging it. And it's like, you can just see all of the green screens and nobody's... There's even stuff like when the action kicks in, where, like, when it's cutting back and forth between a live action person and then the action happening against a green screen. And in even many bad movies, you at least get the sense that there's a seamlessness between those cuts. Between, like, the interior of a car with people driving and panicking, and then the exterior where the car is in, like, chaos or whatever. But there's such a distance through the whole movie between these shots. Like, there's minor characters where there's like a car chase towards the end, and these minor characters crash and the car explodes. And it's like, right before the car crashes and explodes, we have an interior shot of them, like, realizing they're about to die. And I have never felt, that I can remember recently, such a distance between two separate shots that are happening consecutively. Between this person reacting inside the car and then that car exploding. Feels like they're on two completely different planets. And in this kind of movie, that's actually possible, but no. Consecutive shots in the same place at the same time. Person crashes, car explodes. That's 2 shots, interior and exterior, and they could not feel like they were in more separate places at separate times. And a lot of it feels like that when they have to go back and forth like that, when everything's getting real effects heavy at the end here. Or the second half, I guess you could really say. But, yeah, and it feels like, when we actually see the effects, like, that fucking car chase is ridiculous. Where it's like, the whole thing just looks animated. It doesn't even look like a car is driving. I'm pretty sure it's not even a real car driving. I think it's all animation, or at least it looks like it. Or it's just how shitty the green screens are, I don't know. But, when you actually see the scenes, so like, even when we get into space and we see all the shit that's going on, and what the moon's doing and all that, you would think this would be the part where at least it might excel here. This might be the one thing that the movie does well. But, it just feels like so much clutter on the screen. Like, there's just... they're trying to fit so much in at once and show the chaos of it and what all is going on. There's even a moment where, like, Comedy Relief Dude is, like, reacting to everything. And it was jarring because before I was saying none of these characters seem to be reacting to anything. Despite how big everything's going on. But then by the time we actually see them flying around, and Comedy Relief guys like actually reacting, saying like, "Holy shit, look at this," and "Holy shit, look at that." I was already at the point to where it's like, now I just feel like they want us to feel like the effects are better than they are through this character. So it's like they set themselves up for lose-lose. It's like when the characters aren't reacting, it's shit. When the characters are reacting, it's shit. And it's like that's just, like the context never lines up. And that's a bummer. And it's like I was looking. It might not sound like it, but I was looking for stuff to say like, oh, this, at least they got this, or okay, this is kind of cool, or something like that. Not really. When they get to like there's a big reveal when we get towards the end here, and I feel like there might be an alternate universe where they had something here, but there's so many things going on. Where it's like, I don't know if it was... I don't know if it's because I just felt so drained by the movie at this point, because it felt like we were on hour 7 when we got to this, which is probably like an hour and a half into the movie. So that may not have been helping the reveal, where it's like they could have said anything, and it was just like, I just don't give a fuck. I don't fucking care, just end, for God's sake. Just be merciful for once, and just let the credits roll. Like, don't even worry about wrapping up the movie. If you just stop the movie right here, I might like the movie better, even if it has no ending, as long as it ends. Please. Since I was already at that point, that probably didn't help the reveal, but also, obviously it's going to require a lot of exposition, but the exposition is just so boringly done. There's that, and then once it's established, we have characters, like, really over-explaining it. And it's like, once you have to have characters, like, really over-explaining, that's when you might be in the, concept overrides everything else aspect, which is not the place you want to be. I know people really love their high concepts, and sometimes that's enough for people. Apparently it's enough for writers a lot, too. Because they'll go with the concept, and then they'll stop. And just have the movie rely on that. But that's definitely not going to work in this, either. So, the explanation just feels like it just goes on and on and on and fucking on. And it's so, like I said, the movie's just so fucking exhausting. And I can't even find, like, a high point in here to say, well, at least they got this or something. And there's even, and another thing, too, is about the characters being so shitty, is it's also interesting at the same time how few of them there seems to be, considering what's happening. Like, something I kept thinking about was, The Martian. It's like, all they had to do in The Martian was save Matt Damon. And there are so many characters in The Martian, above and below. And it's like, and you got the sense that that's how that situation would have to be handled. And it's like, this movie feels like it has, like, 4 characters in it that know what's going on and know what they're doing. Including NASA itself. Like, between outside characters and NASA, it feels like there's 4 characters that are working this out. And very, very recklessly and selfishly, by the way. And it's it's just such a pain in the ass. So I look at it from like looking at it as an Emmerich movie, because obviously Emmerich's made some shitty movies, plenty of shitty movies, but he does have some good ones, and he has pretty much mastered this kind of thing before. Like I said, I did a video on Day After Tomorrow in 2012. Maybe you like Stargate a lot, and maybe you're into The Patriot. And that's like, even though The Patriot doesn't really fit into this sci-fi or disaster vein, he can make a movie, if he wants to. Midway, I remember not hating, and I think like that was kind of a passion project for him. I mean, it's pretty obvious, and I just rewatched it not that long ago. I'm always gonna love Independence Day. And I kept thinking about Independence Day a lot while watching this, and realizing what Independence Day does so well, and what this movie does so poorly. Like you see, obviously, like when you look at the structure, you see like you have a bunch of characters running around, and we're gonna get to know those characters for a while, and then you start having the big effects stuff, and then because we spent so much time with those characters, we're supposed to have emotional beats when those characters might not make it through this, as it gets bigger and the climax gets bigger and all that. And the effects get more prominent. And it's like, that's an exact explanation for Moonfall and Independence Day. And it's like, then you really start to think about, like, how does one work so incredibly well, still now, being a movie from the 90s, and Moonfall just doesn't, and fails in every regard. And it's like, you look at, you know, the characters in this, and you got, like, Goldblum, and Judd Hirsch, and Harvey Fierstein, Randy Quaid, and it's like they're fun characters. Or you have characters that are essentially iconic, like Will Smith and Bill Pullman, where it's like, you know, is there a better moment in like 90s sci-fi than Will Smith punching an alien in the face and saying "Welcome to Earth"? Or one of my personal favorite lines, "We're gonna have to go up there and whoop E.T.'s ass." And then you have Bill Pullman's speech, which is great. And then you have the moment where Randy Quaid makes his sacrifice. The moment when the alien talks through Brent Spiner. These are moments that like really stand out. And they use the characters. And you're not going to find any of that shit in Moonfall. And it's like, and like I said, you don't have to make the characters perfect. Certainly, like you know, Judd Hirsch's character is certainly not a perfect, you know, characterization or anything like that. But still, you know, you have fun characters, but then you also have moments that feel really real and shockingly emotional, like when, you know, Bill Pullman has to essentially tell Mae Whitman that her mom is dead, and she's kind of already figured it out. That's such a powerful and emotional scene in a movie like Independence Day, just right in the middle of it. And it's like, you're not... These fucking Moonfall characters are not even close to anything like this. And it's like the fact that you can still embrace what the movie is and still have moments like that. You don't have to be dumb all the time. You can be a little dumb or even half dumb and still, you know, try to achieve some sort of greatness, or at least something that's good. And the effects in Independence Day, holy fuck, man, they're so good. I mean, and they're still so good. The sound on the I worried for my speakers whenever I watched this. The sound is so good as well. And everything, the action, it's all so good. And it's like, even when I talked about how the ending to this feels like it goes on and on and on and on. And it's like, when you get to the end of Independence Day, yeah, once again, we have multiple climaxes. But it's like, I love Randy Quaid's sacrifice scene, and then just when it's like, that's the ultimate payoff, I love the scene where Will Smith and Goldblum barely make it out. Like, it's, no matter how many times I see that scene, I'm still afraid they're not going to make it. And there's a way to do this, and there's a way to not do this, is what I'm trying to say. And like I said, and you don't have to sacrifice fun to be good. You really, really don't. I promise. It's been proven. But I don't know. That's how I feel about Moonfall. I just don't like anything about it. Honestly, I can't think of one thing I like about it. And I'm done. I think I'm just done with this video. So, um, pretty much right after this, we're gonna go into three releases that just came out: Uncharted, the new Texas Chainsaw, and the new Soderbergh that's on HBO Max. I guess I should probably check out that Charlie Day thing also, but I'm not really in a hurry. But I'll try to get to it before the month's over. So yeah. And we've got another Emily Blunt thing coming on Wednesday, I think it is. So that's what I'm doing anyway. And the award stuff, obviously, we've got SAG coming up. So yeah, so on top of that, and whatever Owen and Ashley are going to be doing, whatever ends up being next, I think that's it for this.